Amen. We're going to dismiss our kids, heading down to kids' church. Going to have a great time down there this morning. All right. Off they go. You know, those kids, they have so much fun. Sometimes you just kind of, do you feel a little jealous sometimes? You're like, I remember those days. We had crafts, sometimes the little snack. It's a good time. This is going to be fun too, by the way. It's going to be some fun in here. But I do remember kids' church. I remember it being really formative in my life because I grew up in church and encourage, as our kids go out, encourage you to pray that the Lord would do his work even in the class this morning for them as well. This morning, before we get started, just wanted to highlight once again, yes, after service, we have our special business meeting. This is only specifically for one thing. We will be voting on a financial commitment to do so. I like your phrase, a facelift. That would be a good reference to kind of what we're doing. We're talking about exterior painting of our entire building and some exterior work that needs to be done before we paint. And the amount is going to push us into a category where we have to have a membership vote to approve it. So, all of you members, certainly please join us. And if you're not a member, you can come hang out. Love for you to hear what we're doing. Later this year, we're going to be doing water baptism and a membership class. So if you're not a member, you can come kind of check out, like, why does that matter? Well, it kind of matters because we want you to be part of what's happening in this beautiful building, our community, all of it. So that's what the purpose of the meeting is. I don't even want to say that it won't be long. You could end up making it, not a short meeting, but my plan is that it would be fairly straightforward and easy to do. And so, and then you can go and still have lunch. So just want to encourage you to join us. I also am really wanting to challenge you. We are excited about the outreaches we do. I know Pastor Tyler took some folks down and they did the outreach on Saturday. But this Saturday coming, we have the Derby Days, and we do need your help at our booth. We've been doing this now 3 or 4 times already. This will be about the 5th time, I think, we've done our booth. And we do a little art project with kids and adults, and it is painting with coffee. Well, we need your help during the time of the event. So out in the foyer, there's a sign up for you to join us in helping this coming Saturday. I know that Craig and Johanna will be setting up. Jennifer and I will be helping with the tear down. I think Pastor Tyler is going to be there and others. We just need more help than that. Because when you have a 12 by 12 with a couple small tables and chairs all around, people coming and going, you're having to resource them with paper and little painting, pens. No, not pens. Painting brushes, little tiny ones. And then the coffee is in different colors of brown. So you have light brown, medium, and dark. That way they can paint like watercolor. Well, we need your help to keep that going, as well as what I do really well is talking. So I do the talking with people like, hey, where are you from? Glad that you're here. And we also want to invite them to be maybe coming to our breakfast and things at our church. But we could use your help. So please think about it, pray about it, and at the end of service, commit, and then go out there and sign up. So we need your help with that. This morning, we are in chapter 4 of Esther. The title is He Said, She Said. And you will, if you haven't read ahead, you'll discover why that is the title that I chose. There will be a point where all of a sudden we're just literally back and forth between two characters, telling someone to tell someone. This person tells a person to tell that person. This person tells this person to go back and tell that person. And it's really, again, such a great story because it wraps all these different dramatic events. And this is really a powerful part of our story. Last week, you know that we were looking at how there was weak leadership going on, and we know that there was a bad guy, Haman, and he had been offended, and then discovered that the man who offended him was Jewish, and he was a person of an Amalekite, a person of Agag, a former king from generations before, and they had been ancient enemies. And so he determined not only to punish this one guy, Mordecai, our cousin of our character Esther, but he also was going to basically wipe out all of the Jews. He had a plan in place. He convinced the king, a weak king, even though we think he's somewhat powerful in history. You look at Xerxes or his history, and there's actually a lot of weakness there. Then we saw in that chapter last week, there was a lot of weakness. And so, anyhow, we learned last week that we need to beware the dangers of pride and prejudice. We need to beware blind hatred, greed, and feckless leadership, or pointless or eventless leadership. And then we also ended with don't trust evil advisors. And that kind of makes sense. But unfortunately, I think all of us have had someone that was close enough to give us advice, and then we came to find out that was just not good at all. In fact, that was evil. And we even this week, Jennifer and I were talking about just some situations where people have come into your world, and it just seemed like there's something wrong here. There's something wrong with that. We have to beware. Beware that. That was the point. Don't trust evil advisors. And you might think, well, how do I know? I know. Know Jesus. Have his Holy Spirit in you. And you'll know. You'll sense something's not right. God will show you. So those were the things from last week. Amen. Thank you, Andy. He's just warming up. Andy, thank you for that. All right. So verses 1 and 2, Esther 1 and 2. We got to go back somehow. There we go. Yes, thank you, sir. All right, Esther 1 and 2, 4, verses 1 and 2. When Mordecai learned all that had been done, Mordecai tore his clothes, and he put on sackcloth and ashes, and he went out into the midst of the city, and he cried out with a loud and a bitter cry. He went up to the entrance of the king's gate, for no one was allowed to enter the king's gate clothed in sackcloth. So this is what we see as a response. If you remember, we ended last week at the end of the chapter. The king, his name is actually Ahasuerus or Xerxes, and this guy, Haman, decided to sit down on the patio or something and have a little drink because they're kind of proud of themselves, I guess. And then the decree was out, and even the city, the capital city of Susa, was confused about this edict that 11 months from now, you're going to have one day and you can kill all the Jews and take their stuff. I mean, that was kind of the summary. So while the whole city was totally shocked, and the king and this right-hand buddy of his, Haman, were hanging back, Mordecai learns about it, and this is his response. Tears his clothes, puts on sackcloth and ashes, and he goes out into the midst of the city. So why would this reaction, what does that mean? In your culture and mine, maybe we don't understand sackcloth and ashes. Wearing sackcloth and ashes actually was a typical ancient Oriental response to grief. It would be what you do when you're showing people, I am in a state of utter despair and grief. It says that in verse 2 that Mordecai went up to the entrance of the king's gate. It's interesting how many times we hear Mordecai is there. It's a place he would go to, I know, either to be noticed or to hear what's going on. We know he would go there also to kind of check on his cousin, but almost like his daughter, to see how she's doing. We also know this is about 5 years after Esther had become queen. So he's now wearing a garment called sackcloth, and usually they would put the ashes on their head, but it would also just kind of fall down all over them. And you could see they kind of looked like, you guys ever remember the cartoon Peanuts? Pigpen. Remember Pigpen from Peanuts? There's always a dust cloud around this poor little kid. Well, the person would literally look completely ashen because they had ash on them, and they would have a garment of sackcloth. Verse 3, if you would. And in every province, so not just the city of Susa, and that's where Mordecai is. In every province, wherever the king's command and his decree reached, which we're told earlier, it was the entire place. The whole kingdom was reached by this announcement. There was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting and weeping and lamenting, and many of them lay in sackcloth and ashes. So it wasn't just Mordecai's response. It was literally all of the Jews in all of the cities throughout all of the kingdom. The Persian Empire did this because they knew that if the king made it an edict, it was law. And if the king decides it and then it's made into law and it's been announced, he doesn't really go back. So now it's a law. It's going to happen. and they've got 11 months to think about their demise. And immediately they do this. They put on sackcloth and ashes. Question that Johanna gave us on Friday that we had sent out to you by email was, how would I respond at the news of impending doom? How would you respond? I think in modern days, personally, we maybe hear bad news about our health, or you are released from work and asked not to come back, or something like that. That sounds like impending doom. For them, it was, our whole people are going to be eliminated. So how would you respond? What is your response to impending doom? Well, their response was sackcloth and ashes. So, do you have a helper? All right. So we've got something. There we go. Thank you, Joey. So, anybody ever seen sackcloth before? Okay, well, some of us are, yeah, I know. Okay, well, I did too. But everyone gets a piece. This is actually more like called jute, or it's a cloth. Usually, this stuff's made for using in a garden. You can lay it down, and it kind of holds the stuff together, and maybe it lets the right things grow and the wrong things not. But anyway, feel it. Sackcloth would be made of natural fibers, either plant-based or often it was animals' wool. So it might have been camel hair. It might have been made out of goat or sheep, but it would not have been soft. In fact, sackcloth would basically be the material you use to make a sack. Anybody seen, like the older sacks? People used to put all kinds of material in it. You would put coffee beans in it if you're shipping coffee around the world, and all kinds of things were packaged in this kind of material, more tightly woven, but in a sackcloth. So the thing he put on himself was a garment of this material, not that size. It's not like a little washcloth size. We're talking, he would have taken a sack. I don't know, maybe something like this. Feel so proud of myself. So I had some leftover, and I decided to try and make for myself something that would resemble our character. I also made it too tall because I always wished I was taller. But I can already tell you immediately, this is not comfortable. It's rubbing on my arms. Take your sackcloth, rub it on your arm for just while I'm talking. Just start rubbing it on there. How's that feel? Feel good? Okay, you're exfoliating. I know, but I mean, really, you keep doing it, and you're exfoliating where you didn't mean to exfoliate. You know what I mean? Right here in the neck, right here on the arms. And our poor character is so down and depressed, he's wearing a garment like this. He's put it over himself, and it's itchy. Okay, so Gary, come on up here, Gary. All right, I'm going to let Gary give this a try too. Come on up. I know Gary's he's a kind of guy that would do this. Okay, my friend, come on up here. Let's see what you think of it. See if you can put this on. So just keep going over the top. Keep going. Keep going. And right here. Yeah, there you go. And you can put your arms out the armholes. I just have to show this. By the way, hey, Mom, look. I sewed it myself. Right here and right here. I sewed it. I took some of this stuff, and I put it in the thing, and how's it feel? Kind of like an old, rough wool sweater, yeah. You couldn't want to be in that very long, could you? No. Super uncomfortable. You look good. But you shouldn't be feeling good. No, put a sad face, look on your face. Oh, there we go. Here's our poor character. He's not Gary now. He's sad, Mordecai. So you want to get out of that?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Gary. All right. Would you give Gary a hand? Thank you for helping me out. Now, there's all these little furry things. Jennifer, she said, be careful because it's going to put stuff everywhere. She is right. It's kind of falling all over. But you have to understand, this was a very common traditional thing to do. If you had lost someone in your family, mourning, and it was very devastating, that's what you would put something on. Now, I decided not to bring a pile of burnt papers and ashes and just dust you with it, Gary. But But they also would have had that all over. I mean, it's on purpose. It is to make you feel awful. Interestingly, it's usually in response. It's a mourning, fasting, weeping, and lamenting. The sackcloth. The purpose is that it's coarse, scratchy. Keep rubbing it on your arm. Keep going. Feel it. It's coarse. It's scratchy. It's uncomfortable against the skin, and it strips away comfort. It also strips away your status. I'm sure that Gary felt really fashionable wearing that, but you aren't just walking around town, going to the nicest restaurant sporting the sackcloth because you're so sad and you're so down. You're actually trying to show, I don't care what status I came from, I am in deep despair. That's the purpose of the sackcloth. The ashes that they would normally put on the head was a symbol of ruin, of desolation, of mortality, and kind of even referring to what we often refer to from dust to dust. From dust I was made, and now I'm dust I'm returning. I'm just like the very basic element left of me is this dust that's all over me, and it is a physical way to show what's going on internally. That's exactly what Mordecai is doing, but he's not alone. The entire Jewish community throughout all the provinces are doing this. So don't forget, it's not just a thing about this story is about Mordecai and Esther. It's actually the whole community responding to the threat that they will be killed 11 months from the time it was declared. So that's the scene that we're in. So keep holding on to your sackcloth. You don't have to rub it on your arm. I don't want you to get anything, kind of an abrasion or anything, but just keep hanging on to it. Just feel its texture. And think about what their feeling was somewhat related to the feeling of wearing this awful material. Verse 4. When Esther's young women and her eunuchs came to her, the queen was deeply distressed. She sent garments to clothe Mordecai so that he might take off his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. So discovering and hearing about this thing that he's wearing sackcloth and ashes, the young women came, losing my pieces here. The young women came and just told her about it. She says, well, we need to take care of him. Make sure and get him some clothes. Sent him some garments. And he says, I'm not doing it. I'm still going to wear the sackcloth. So what's interesting is when he refuses her, this is the beginning of the back and forth. What you're going to see is the he said, she said is Mordecai is in mourning and despair. Esther is trying to deal with him. And then we find verse 5. Verse 5 says, then Esther called for Hatak. Or Hatak or Hatak. That's how you would say his name. One of the king's eunuchs who'd been appointed to attend her. And ordered him to go to Mordecai. Look at what she orders him to do. To learn what this was and why it was. She didn't know. You and I would think an edict by the king, her husband, she's the queen, by the way, an edict by the king sent out in the entire city of Susa, the entire kingdom, the Persian Empire. Maybe the queen would have known. But this gives us the evidence she didn't actually understand. It says she sent this guy, and we're going to hear his name a couple times because he's the back and forth go-between. She sends Hatak, orders him to go to Mordecai to learn what this was and why it was. First of all, she's just trying to deal with, maybe she thinks he's kind of like crazy Uncle Mordecai or Cousin Mordecai. Oh, crazy Cousin Mordecai. I don't know what's going on with him. Get him some clothes. It's kind of embarrassing. Get him some clothes. She doesn't know. She doesn't know what this was and why this was. What's interesting to me is that the whole region knows, but she doesn't know. So the first point this morning is just titled this, Sackcloth and Ashes. Mordecai and all the Jews, they respond to the edict with mourning. And Esther is clueless of the jeopardy that they're all in. Kind of an interesting place to be in. So this is a real thing happening out in the real world, but we see that Esther is not actually connected to all of that. So I don't know about you, but at times you think about this very situation and you think, How awful that people would be so clueless that they don't know what's going on in the real world. Part of it would be they might protect her from that. Just because she's a queen. She doesn't need to know everything that's going on in the kingdom. They just, she's there to be the queen and isn't aware of everything. They may not have told her. She probably also doesn't just wander through the city. When you're at the level she was chosen to be at, you don't go around and walk around the city. They bring stuff to you. So she didn't know. So the application is respond to real threats against you. Mordecai does that. He responds. If there's a real threat, don't sugarcoat it. You got to let people know. And that's what he chose to do. And then be informed. Maybe you don't live in a palace in Susa. Maybe you aren't the queen of some major empire. But it is good to know what's going on. So I encourage you. You got to know what's happening. She wasn't informed. She couldn't even understand. Why is cousin Mordecai doing this? This doesn't make any sense. So we see the continuation of our story, verses 6 and 7. Hatak went out to Mordecai. So the queen tells him, you got to go and find out what's going on. So it goes out to Mordecai in the open square of the city, in front of the king's gate. Mordecai told him all that had happened to him. I'm sure it was from the beginning. I was at the gate, and Haman came by, and I didn't bow. And the guys kept telling me to bow, but I wouldn't bow. I wouldn't bow because I'm a Jew, and he's an Agagite, and I wouldn't do that. And then he got mad, so he convinced the king, and the king, so it tells us, he even knew the exact sum of money that Haman had promised to pay the king. You remember, it was a lot of money, into the king's treasuries for the destruction of the Jews. So he's able to specifically tell this Hatak, is his name, what the actual problem was, what was going on. Well, apparently Hatak didn't really know either, or he didn't know the details. So Mordecai is explaining to him, you've got to understand all of these things. This is what's going on. We see here in verse 6 that Hatak learns about the edict, and this is a plot, Haman's plot, and it tells us what the plot is in the last 6 words, the destruction of the Jews. And it does seem like it's the first time. Again, I think that Hatak being one of the right-hand people for either Esther or the king is somewhat also sheltered. They just still don't know what's actually going on out there. And we need to be careful not to be overly sheltered. I don't think we need to live out in the middle of the world and be doing everything the world does. That would be wrong. We need to be aware of what's happening out there. So be aware. Verse 8 then says this, Mordecai also gave him a copy. So not only this is what's going on, he goes over, and I'm just guessing, the edict on the wall, they kind of stick it on there, and it's all written in pretty fancy cuneiform or whatever. Whoop, yank it off. Here you go. Cuneiform is probably not cuneiform, but anyway, Mordecai gives him a copy of the written decree that's been issued in Susa for their destruction. I love that this is in there, because how many times has someone told you something, you're like, really? I mean, there's no way that's true. This is a literal copy of the actual edict, and he gives it to him, which describes the destruction that's going to come, so that he could take it and show it to Esther. And then it tells us what Mordecai told him, so that he could explain it to her and command her to go to the king to beg his favor and plead with him on behalf of her people. Wow. She's been the queen for like 5 years. But now Mordecai is trying to send this servant back to her to tell her, you want to know what's going on? Here's what's going on. Here's a copy of it. And this is what she needs to do. She's got to go to the king and beg him, plead on behalf of her people. What I think is interesting here is this changes something, doesn't it? More than once, at least twice, we have been told that her cousin, Mordecai, who raised her, had told her not to reveal who she is, that she's Jewish, that she's an Israelite woman. Now, he's saying to this guy, he says, Hatak, you've got to go to the king, tell her, command her, it says, you've got to go to the king, plead with him on behalf of your people. This would be the first time that she would have revealed that she's actually an Israelite woman. The king didn't know. So this would be the first time she reveals her heritage. Another thing that's interesting, remember that it was also said multiple times that Esther had always done whatever Mordecai told her to do. He told her not to tell. He told her more than once not to tell. And so here he's giving her instruction, but now it's the opposite. Make sure you go to the king and tell him, you're going to kill my people. So I think it's interesting. Verses 9 and 11 through 11. And Hatak went and told Esther. So now it's almost like you've got Mordecai over here by the gate, can't go in, he's wearing the garment. Then you've got Esther inside, and this guy Hatak's going to go back and forth. He's already left Esther, gone over and talked to Mordecai. Mordecai gives him the stuff. He's got the edict. Now he's going back over to talk to Queen Esther. And Hatak went and told Esther what Mordecai had said. So he's telling him everything, shows the edict. And Esther spoke to Hatak and commanded him to go back to Mordecai and say, all of the king's servants and all the people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the inner circle without being called, there is but one law, to be put to death, except the one to whom the king holds out the golden scepter so that he may live. As for me, I've not been called to come into the king these 30 days. So she says, you've got to go and tell him this message. It's in quotes, so you know, verse 11 on down, that's all her. She's explaining to this assistant, Hatak, go to Mordecai and explain what everyone actually knows. I'm sure Mordecai knew what he was saying was the threat was the king doesn't like really take people just to come in and walk on in. But she reminds him and says, all of the king's servants and all the people know, everybody knows. You can't just go in there unless you've either been invited or he holds this golden scepter out. The question again, how would I respond? This is now, not only is it showing us Mordecai's response to impending doom, now we see Esther's initial response to impending doom. This is her response. Go and tell Mordecai, remind him, do you know what would happen to me? At first, it really does appear that Esther's response is that she's concerned for herself. That would be why I have entitled our series that she is a reluctant hero queen. There's a little bit of reluctance in that she's like, you know what's going to happen if I go? If I even go to him, even though the message is important. It's a death wish, really. So the second point this morning is this. Mordecai commands the queen. I just thought that was interesting, kind of caught my attention. He explains himself and commands Esther, you've got to intervene. Esther's response is really self-preserving reluctance. Not so sure I can do that because I haven't even been there in the last 30 days. And she's the queen. So, and she knows, because she's not the first queen, by the way, remember, Queen Vashti? She is replacement queen of the first queen who also didn't please the king. So she knows he's not the kind of person that's permanently committed to his wife. He removed her. Legend has that Queen Vashti was probably executed at some point, but we don't have the record in the scripture. So what do you do? What is Esther? The question I kind of thought about was, well, does that reaction, especially the initial reaction, does that reaction make Esther a bad person? To sit there and go, you know what's going to happen to me. I don't think it makes her bad. I think it makes her human, by the way. Sometimes we take some of our Bible characters and we elevate them above human status. I'm not going to talk about other faiths or religions or sainthood or something like that, but she's a human being, fully 100% human. And she's like, do you know what's going to happen if I go and do that? And so that's what I think it does. It just reveals that she's human. But I also think her reaction is interesting. Her reaction, we'll see, actually it changes. But do you remember the king's reaction to when his first queen, the Queen Vashti, refused him? His first reaction was that he was mad about what she did. And his advisors came to him and said, that's not the only effect that happened here. It affects the whole region. Because do you remember chapter 1? Now all the men in our whole region are going to tell or all the women are going to tell their wives, no, their husbands no. All these women are going to be, rejecting their husbands, and that's bad for our whole kingdom. So that can't happen. Well, it's kind of similar in the same way, where Esther's first reaction is more narrow-minded. She sees just how it's going to affect her, like King saw how it only affected him. But now we're going to see what Mordecai is able to do. So continue on, verses 12 to 14. Oh, sorry. I didn't get that part, did I? Mordecai commands the queen. We saw that he explains himself. The application is call for action when it's necessary. When we know something has to be done, call for action. We can't just sit on something. If it's that important, then you're going to need to call for action. And we'll see here that is exactly what Mordecai does. So verses 12 and 14. They told Mordecai what Esther had said. So again, you've got this guy going back and forth. He's talked to Esther. Now he's going to go back over. But this is interesting. They told Mordecai. So it's not just this Haytak character going back and forth. Either he picked up a few helpers to come along and convince, but now it's not just him alone. They told Mordecai what Esther had said. So it's probably some of the other people with him. Then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther. So they tell him, well, this is what Esther said. She said, you know what's going to happen? And Mordecai kind of pulls are you looking at the bigger picture kind of thing? So Mordecai responds, do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. And then he shifts a little bit in the last sentence. And who knows whether you've not come to the kingdom for such a time as this, the phrase that we're referring to this morning. So Mordecai responds by helping her see the much bigger picture. Don't think for 1 second that if the king's edict says the entire place that every Jew can be murdered, that even the queen is protected. You're Jewish. They could kill you. His own law says they could. But even if someone else comes and there's a way of escape, there is deliverance coming from some other location, some other way, you and your father's house will still perish. He's saying, because of your decision, you will be guilty of not having done something when you should have. I think there are times when we have to really look at a situation and we might think, oh, maybe someone else will get it. It might be your job. That might be actually why you're there. It might be for such a time as this, that you are dealing with whatever you're dealing with. We can't always, as a friend of mine, Chris Hodges, likes to say, you can't always kick the can down the road. You can't always push it off to someone else to deal with, or maybe I'll deal with it later. Sometimes you just got to deal with it right now and make a really hard decision. So that's what's happening here. Mordecai sends the message back. So he's over here telling the guys, this is what you need to tell them. So they go back over to the queen, and what they deliver is this message. If you keep silent at this time, while the relief and deliverance may come, you and your father's household will perish. But who knows whether you've not come into this position for this very purpose? It's a great question. It's famous over history and over time, that phrase, for such a time as this. Maybe God has a greater purpose. We look at a situation and usually we're so zoned in on it, we're not really thinking of what might be bigger about it other than how it affects us. But if we look at our situation and consider, does God have something going on here? And I've got a role to play in it, but he's got a bigger purpose than what I'm seeing, how it affects me. Think about that for yourself for just a second. What kind of situation are you in right now? And does God have you there for an actual reason? It's not some strange coincidence. There's actually a parallel, and sometimes I think people misplant this phrase into another story. Earlier in the Old Testament, Genesis chapter 45, when Joseph, one of the 12 brothers, was in Egypt. Awesome story. I love that story so much. But when Joseph was in Egypt and he'd been in captivity, his brothers had sold him into slavery. That slave owner sold him to Potiphar. Potiphar threw him in jail because he was falsely accused of going after his wife. And then 2 years later, then he ends up working for, basically, becoming the right hand in Egypt. And the Pharaoh trusted him and trusted him and trusted him. And he got to this place of second in command, great authority. Interesting, the parallel. Young Jewish kid up into the most powerful office and second in command. So was Esther in a way. But anyway, so this is the story. In Genesis 45, you see it says in that story, the story of Joseph, he's telling his brothers who have just discovered the brother they sold into slavery and thought was dead is actually the right-hand guy for the most powerful person in the area, the Pharaoh. And now, he says to his brothers, do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. He's telling his brothers who sold him into slavery, take a chill pill, it's okay. God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are 5 years still in which there will be neither plowing or harvest. God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh, like an advisor, and Lord of all his house and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Joseph was able to see that God had a purpose in why he was there and the whole weird journey that it took for him to get there. The brothers only come to find out, and they're scared to death. He does have the power, and they think he's probably going to kill us all. And yet he says, don't worry. You aren't even the ones that sent me here. God did. There are many verses, many places in Scripture where we are to trust that God has a plan. And in your situation, whatever you're dealing with right now, yes, we make decisions and sometimes put ourselves in a bad spot. But sometimes God also has put us in a place for something even greater than we can see. I know in our story, we'll get back to it in a second, but Esther didn't see. She didn't even know there was a problem. Mordecai didn't know how to solve it, but he knew, I got to get to her to help her understand. In Genesis 50, verse 20, as it gets further on, the brothers are back together again after their father has died. Now they're really scared because they thought our father was alive and our brother was being kind, but now that our father's dead, he'll probably still want to kill us. These brothers, they just weren't really good on the trust level. And Joseph says to them, do not fear, for am I in the place of God? And as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. Can you see the parallel? He's saying, God put me here to save us all. Joseph, Genesis, chapter 45, chapter 50 in Genesis. Decades and decades and decades and decades later, you've got this story of Esther as she is basically second in command of the biggest empire in the area and has an opportunity potentially to save her people. So we're going to see that. So I just think it's a powerful, interesting parallel. So how does God do that today? You know, to me, it speaks of purpose and that God has purposes for things we don't always understand. So what are you going through right now? I don't need you to tell me. Just be thinking about it. Because sometimes we feel like we've been cursed into something. And, well, I know in Joseph's situation in the Genesis text, he was in slavery. He was in jail. I mean, that all looked pretty awful. But God had a bigger plan. Maybe God has something for you. But we have to understand that we trust him through. And we submit to him. And we are obedient to him. And God has a bigger plan. So we have to be thinking, maybe God's got a bigger plan here than what I can see. What is God's purpose for my situation? I can't answer that for you. But while you think about it and you wrestle with it, maybe you can. Or at least you can say, God, I don't know what my purpose is for this situation. Would you please reveal it to me? God does answer prayers. He loves to reveal things to us, maybe when we're ready. So maybe after this service, as you're thinking about it, or at the end of our service, you can just pray and say, okay, God, here's the situation I'm in. I don't know why. Can you show me the purpose? What am I to do? What's my role in this thing? Does that make sense? Amen. Yes, nod with me if you will. Okay, got it. So verses 15 and 16, it says this, and back to our story in Esther. Esther gets the message brought to her by Hatak. He was over here talking to Mordecai, and he goes back with whoever's with him and relays the message to Esther. Esther tells them to reply to Mordecai. I've heard what you said. Something's happened in Esther between verses 15 and 16. I'm sorry, 14 and 15. Then Esther told them to reply, go gather all the Jews to be found in Susa and hold a fast on my behalf. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. And I and my young women will also fast as you do. Then I will go to the king, though it's against the law, and if I perish, I perish. So that is where she changes from being reluctant to being a hero. You know, in movies, we see movies where someone's willing to put their life on the line. Some of them end up dying in the movie because they saved everybody else, but it cost them their life, kind of like Samson pushing the things and all that. Well, this is her saying, I'll do what you're asking me to do, but not until we've already done this. Fasting, seeking God for 3 days, then I will go. I think it's really important to see that that's what she calls for, a 3-day fast. And then she agrees to go to the king, no matter what. It's a big change we see in Esther. She finally commits to it, and with it, she calls this community-wide effort. You know, we have our church, we do a monthly fast. We fast from a Tuesday to a Wednesday, and then we break the fast with a meal. This month it'll be the last Wednesday of the month, which is a 5-Wednesday month. So make sure you look on the calendar and double check. It's later in the month, not this coming Wednesday, the following. But the purpose of our fast is literally what they're trying to do here, is to seek the Lord, to focus on God, to set something aside we normally enjoy so that we can just be in tune with Him. That's the purpose and point of a fast. You and I, we don't actually convince God anything by fasting. He's not really impressed. Ooh, wow, you didn't eat for a whole day. Congratulations. You know, God's not like, no, God's just saying, I want your time. I want your attention. How can I speak to you when you're busy doing this all the time? So He says, how about you set that aside for just a bit, and instead, maybe sit in a chair, have a journal out, seek me, write down what I say to you, whatever. But that's really what the intention is. They weren't eating, they weren't drinking for 3 days so that they could seek the Lord. They could focus on what God had for them. And then also be built up to do what is super hard to do, put your life on the line. I really love that she called people to join her, so she wasn't doing it alone. Again, it's like the community of church, it's the community of believers saying, we're with you in this. Amen? Amen. All right, so what we see is the last verse in verse 17. Mordecai, so now we got Mordecai over here. He then went away and did everything as Esther had commanded him or had ordered him. It's not the only time, but here we start seeing even a little bit of a shift. Now Esther's telling Mordecai what to do. I think it's pretty great. You see, we have to also be willing to say, okay, let's do this. Jump in and be a part of what God is saying to do. And if you have a role and a part in something God needs you to do, you got to be active. He went away and did everything, it says. I'd like to ask our worship team, if you would, to come on up to the platform. The third point this morning is this. The final point is, for such a time as this. Super great phrase, and it is something that helps maybe us to understand, perhaps. I mean, he didn't say it that he knew for sure. He just said, perhaps this is why you were chosen to be the queen of the entire Persian Empire. Perhaps, maybe it was for such a time as this. Mordecai warns her, risking death or even certain death, and Esther agrees. The final application is this. Speak the truth plainly. He literally spoke the truth to her. Mordecai just told her, this is what it is. If you don't do something, it's not just going to be about you. It's going to affect our whole people. Sometimes we're not willing to speak plainly, folks. In love, but in truth, speak the truth plainly. While it might even sometimes be uncomfortable, it is the better way. And then Believe in God's providence. Believe. He said, maybe this is why you're where you are, and perhaps God will do something. We've got to believe. We have to know that God has something. He has something going on. We don't always know the detail. So often it's so clear after, right? They call it, 2020 is hindsight. You get to see it after the event. You're, oh, that makes perfect sense later. But we can believe. We can trust that God has a purpose. Would you stand this morning as we consider these things? What purpose does God have for me in my situation, in what I'm walking through and dealing with? What is the role that I have? What am I supposed to be doing? Because we do need to take some steps. It sounds like, and we'll find out here in a few chapters, but it sounds like our character Esther is willing. Now she's willing to do something that's pretty bold. Maybe it's going to take some boldness for you. Maybe it's going to take you pulling some people around you to pray with you about something before you're able to do it. That's fine too. But we can't just sit and we can't just expect things are just going to be just fine. We need to, the situation you're in, you may need to pull your believing family, your church family around you and say, God, we don't understand what's happening, but we need your help and to join you. This morning, I want to encourage you. If you've got a situation going on that you want prayer for, we are here for you. Pastor Tyler will be up here. I will be up here. We have others that can come and pray with you. If you just want to come and pray, you can come over to this side. And I'm not going to reach out. I'll probably fall off the thing. And pray in this area. And we'll let you pray by yourself if that's what you'd like. But if you want someone to join with you in prayer, just like Esther was asking to join her in considering what God had, then we'll be over here to join you as well. But folks, whatever your circumstance, it usually doesn't just get better on its own. We need to seek the Lord. And maybe he'll give you some insight what it is you need to do or should do or keep doing. So as the music begins to play, step out from where you are and let's come to this place and see what the Lord has for us this morning. Step out from where you are. If you have other needs, we'd love to pray with you as well. Whether it be a prayer for a medical issue, something else going on, please come on down. We'd love to pray with you.